Shalom, this is Rav Johnny Solomon, the virtual rabbi. I'm here in my sukkah in Even Shmuel. And as tonight is Hoshanah Rabba, I thought I'd share a beautiful Torah idea that very much relates to the spirit of the day, and I hope will inspire us, not just for tonight, as we come to Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, but for the rest of the year. Interestingly, the Nitai Gavriel, Rav Gavriel Tzina, writes in his fascinating collection of Minhagim that it is customary to study Sefer Dvarim on Hoshanah Rabba. He says, and I quote, "Noagim liyot harim beleil Hoshanah Rabba." It is a custom to stay awake on the night of Hoshanah Rabba, for kor'in beseder Dvarim, and to read the Sefer of Dvarim, Mishneh Torah, that's the rabbinic name for Sefer Dvarim, mipnei sheba katuv ikar avat Hashem v'yirato, because it is in Sefer Dvarim where we find the core teachings about our love and our awe of God. Sefer Dvarim ultimately is a Musa Sefer. It's where Moshe teaches us what it means to be in a relationship with God. It's where the ideas, the messages, the commandment to love God are found. The ideas and emphasis on having a sense of fear and awe of God are expressed. Sefer Dvarim is an exquisite book of the Torah, one we've just read through over the last couple of months in Shul. And so, quoting a variety of Hasidic masters, including Sha'ar Kavanot by the Arizal, Rabbi Tzina basically teaches us that one of the things we should reflect on tonight on Hoshanah Rabba is the messages of Sefer Dvarim. However, while some people may begin at the start of Sefer Dvarim, reflecting on the journey of the Jewish people and how Moshe retells that story, I'd like to reflect on the end of Sefer Dvarim, and especially what happens in the hours prior to Moshe's death, which we just read in Parshat Vazot HaBracha, and we'll read again on Simchat Torah. And what happens in the hours prior to Moshe's death? Well, of course, we know that Moshe blesses the people. That is read in Vazot HaBracha. But something else happens, something which, when I first encountered this midrash, it really moved me to tears. Something relating to the teacher-student relationship between Moshe and Yehoshua, and what happens when Moshe realizes that his student Yehoshua needs to take his place as a new leader and teacher of the Jewish people. And here I'd like to quote from the Midrash Tanchuma. I'm quoting from Tanchuma, Parshat V'etchanan Ot Vav. If you have that Sefer, section 6 of Midrash Tanchuma on Parshat V'etchanan. And what do we read? We read how Moshe has come to the difficult realization that he is not going to live for much longer, that there needs to be new leaders for the new chapter of the Jewish people, the chapter of entering into Eretz Yisrael. As the Midrash says, Amar lo kach alta b'machshava v'chen minhago shel olam dor dor v'dorshav dor dor u'farnasav dor dor manhigav. Every generation has its own leaders. Every generation has to be led in its own unique way. And Moshe was being taught that now was the time for him to step aside, for his disciple, Yehoshua, to take the reins of leadership of Am Yisrael. But here is where the Midrash tells us something so fascinating, so moving, and so magnificent. Moshe comes to realize that if the whole point of his passing away is that Yehoshua will take over, he says, I'm happy for him to take over so that I don't pass away. I'm happy to live, but let him be the leader. I'm happy to stand aside and let he become the Manhig Yisrael. עד עכשיו היה חלקך לשרת לפניי, ועכשיו עבד חלקך, והגיעה השעה של יהושע תלמידך לשרת. Says God, until now it's been your task to lead the people, now it's the task of your student Yoshua. אמר לפניו, ריבוני, משה רבנו responds to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ריבוני, my master, אם מפני Yoshua אני מת, if I'm dying because you want to give Yoshua the leadership position, אלך ויהיה לו תלמיד. I'll go and I'll be his student. It's so beautiful. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm prepared to be my student's student if it gives me more time on earth, if it gives me more time to learn Torah, if it gives me more of an opportunity to be an Eved Hashem. אמר לו, God said to Moshe, אם אתה רוצה לעשות כך, לך עשה. If you want to do that, go and do it. עמד משה והשכים לפתחו של יהושע. Moshe got up and he went to the entrance where Yoshua was teaching, to the tent where Yoshua was teaching Torah. היה יהושע יושב ודורש. At the time, the teachers would sit and the students would stand. By the way, that's one of the reasons why the giving the Torah is called Ma'amad Har Sinai. At the time, the teachers would be sitting and those who are learning Torah would be expected to stand, as Chazal say, Hemidu Talmidim Harbe, make many students stand. ועמד משה וכפף קומתו, והניח ידו על פיו, נתעלמו עיניו של יהושע ולא ראה אותו. Moshe comes in, he bends over so that Yoshua doesn't notice him, he doesn't say anything, כדי שיצטרף וישלים עצמו למיטה. והלכו ישראל אצל משה לפתחו ללמוד תורה. Yet at this moment, the people have come and they want to listen to the Moshe. ושאלו ואמרו, משה רבנו היכן הוא? They said, where's Moshe? אמרו להם, השכים והלך לפתחו של יהושע. And the talk of the midbar, not the town, Moshe has gone to learn from Yoshua. הלכו מצאו בפתחו של יהושע, ויהושע יושב, משה עומד. And there they found Yoshua sitting down, and Moshe standing up learning. אמרו לו ליהושע. Now they then accuse Yoshua. They say, מה עלתה לבך שמשה רבנו עומד ואתה יושב? What's going on? Moshe standing and you're sitting? כיוון שתה אליו וראוהו, מיד קרא בגדיו וצעק ובכה ואמר, רבי, אבי, אדוני. אמרו ישראל למשה, משה רבנו למדנו תורה. Yoshua is in shock. He can't believe that his teacher is now studying from him. And the people are begging to learn Torah from Moshe. אמרו ישראל למשה, משה רבנו למדנו תורה. אמר להם, אין לי רשות. He says, I have no permission to do so anymore. אמרו לו, אין מניחים אותך. They said, we're not leaving you alone until you teach us Torah. יצא בת קול ואמרה להם, לימדו מיהושע. A voice from heaven is heard, and it tells the rest of Bnei Israel who are present, and Moshe, learn from Yoshua. קבלו עליכם לשב ללמוד מיהושע. Accept upon yourselves to be here and to study from Yoshua. ישב יהושע בראש. So what happened was now the following. Yoshua sat at the front of the lecture hall of the tent. Moshe b'mino. Moshe was given a seat to his right. Bnei Aaron mismolo, and the sons of Aaron to his left. But ultimately, Yoshua Yoshev v'doresh b'nei Moshe. Yoshua was the one who was preaching, who was teaching, even in the presence of Moshe. אמר רבי שמואל בר נחמני, אמר רבי יונתן, בשש אמר יהושע, ברוך אשר בחר בצדיקים, ניטלו מסורות חוכמה ממשה וניתנו ליהושע. Said Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, quoting Rabbi Yonatan, When Yeshua said, "Blessed be he who chose such righteous people," referring to his teacher, in fact, the traditions of wisdom that were bestowed to Moshe were then ultimately bestowed to Yeshua. And at that moment, Moshe was now truly a student. He didn't know what was being taught. He'd forgotten some of the things that he'd received from God, and was now learning from his student as if he'd never heard these ideas before. אחר שעמדו ישראל מישיבה, אמרו למשה, סתם לנו את התורה. אמר להם, איני יודע מה אשיב לכם. היה משה רבנו נחשב ונופל. באותו שעה אמר משה, ריבון העולמים, עד עכשיו ביקשתי חיים, ועכשיו הרי נפשי נתונה לך. Having forgotten Torah and unable to give the rest of people what they're asking for him, he said, until now, God, I begged you that I should live, but now my soul is here for you to do with as you wish. I remember first learning this midrash a couple of years ago and being totally overcome by it. This image of Moshe Rabbeinu sitting as a student, standing as a student, in front of Yeshua, his disciple. And why? Because he wanted to live. And why? Because he wanted to learn. And why? Because it wasn't a matter of ego. It was a sense of valuing Torah itself. Tonight it's the practice to stay up learning, as mentioned, some study Sefer Dvarim, because in Sefer Dvarim we learn ideas relating to love and awe of God, but also we learn from Moshe Rabbeinu what it means to love Torah, what it means to teach Torah, to the point that the Midrash tells us at the end of Sefer Dvarim that he was prepared to be a student of his student. You know, the greatest accolade we have for the greatest Torah scholars is Talmid Chacham. No person is a Chacham that they don't need to learn anything. Even the wisest of people, even most knowledgeable of Torah scholars, are always a student. Talmid Chacham, Talmidah Chachama. This is what we learn from our teacher Moshe, who even towards his death sought to learn. When we come to Simchat Torah in 2 days' time here, 3 outside of Israel, what are we celebrating? We're celebrating our relationship with God through Torah, our ability to learn Torah, and the recognition that through learning we humble ourselves, and through doing so, that makes us a better kli, a better vessel to receive the divine presence and to be better of the Hashem, servants of God. So these are just a few short thoughts based around a stunning midrash, which I hope you enjoyed. I wish you a meaningful Hoshanah Rabba. You should learn well. You should have a wonderful evening wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And wish you also a Moadim Simcha and a Chag Sameach.